So here we are, Audio Workstations, week 2. It's about 7 o'clock. It's August 15th, 2013. August 15th, 2013 already. And we got a great live session tonight. We're going to do a complete overview of PTA 2. And along the way, we're going to take some questions. And then at the end, we are going to take some final questions too. So I'm really going to try to move fast through this for you, because I want you to get the information that you need, but I don't want to burn up your whole night with an overview. But if you hang on and then you go back through this archive once it's posted, and then if you also take advantage of the prep session that's in the assignment guidelines, let's look at that. Okay, right here, we looked at this last week, but right here, just verify that you can see my screen, please. Okay, so right here in the front of the PTA 2 assignment where this arrow is pointing in, download the prep session for this assignment. That's going to be a nice, quick, fast review of what we're going into detail here. So if you're tuned in now, or if you're tuned in the archive, hang on, stay here, because you're going to get a lot. This is just a blow by, all right? But it is in there, okay? Remember, you're reading through page 1 and page 2. If your assignment doesn't fit on FSO, remember, read this important note right here, okay? And then when you're done, make sure you read these important questions for review. Remember, you're having to paste the link from Dropbox, from your Dropbox, pasting the download link into a Word doc and uploading that Word doc to FSO. But you really want to go through these questions here, okay? Just really, really want you guys to get the hang of this. Probably by now you already feel like you understand what's going on. Hey, one last thing to point out. Be careful. Look how we're talking about naming the submissions, because I'm still seeing certain students that are just not, I just know it's not reading the instructions. That's all it is. But remember, we're asking you to name your assignment, first name, last name, and then the name of the assignment, okay? And this has to do with the way that we catalog the downloads. And this actually just streamlines our workflow. So just remember, if last week you feel like you read it, just take an extra 2 minutes when you sit down, read through this, read through page 2, important questions for review, just to really make sure you understand it. And then also check out the naming conventions too, okay? So here's Pro Tools Assignment 2. It looks very well like the Pro Tools Assignment 1. It's basically laid out very much the same way. And we're going to go through each step. Now, remember, this is a seamless 8-minute recording. There was a little confusion with a couple assignments that were turned in last week. No edited videos will be accepted, okay? This is a straight, step-by-step, unedited 8 minutes or less screen recording with all the steps tied together. All it is tuning into what we're doing here, tuning into the prep session, and practicing for a while. Not practicing for 10 minutes at 12:45 on Sunday, but, practicing for maybe an hour at one sitting, maybe a half an hour at the next sitting, and then sitting down and going through a couple actual recording takes till you get that perfect performance, okay? So one side note I'll mention is that there are some points that in this session that we're going through at right now that will be questioned in the exams. But if you do the reading, and then also remember, you have those required viewing archives. If you watch the required viewing archives, it's going to take a little bit of time. Remember, this is an accelerated bachelor's degree, right? You're getting a bachelor's degree in half the time that other people get. So we're heavy hitting material here. But you have those archives, those required viewing archives. If you watch those archives, there's a lot of info in there that you'll pick up for when you take your test. But when you take your test, remember, let's just tell it like it is. This is an open book test, right? You have access to your Pro Tools Ignite. You have access to your Pro Tools reference manual. You have access to Google. So, your answers are at your fingertips. You just have to be a little bit crafty sometimes on the way you search for your terms, okay? So there will be some exam material that will be covered in this live session, but we won't be directly pointing it back to the exam, okay? Hang on one second. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So let's check it out. Let's check it out. So here's the gist of what PTA 2 is going to talk about. Remember, PTA 1, we were looking at the layout of Pro Tools. We looked at the edit window. We looked at our bins. Guys, how's Pro Tools look on my screen? Are you seeing everything? Okay, I know a lot of you are watching this on your laptop, so I just want to make sure you're seeing the, you're seeing the tracks bin, you're seeing the clips bin, edit playlist. Everything's in real good view here. All right, so what we're talking about I'm just going to refresh about what we were talking about last week. We looked at the two views in Pro Tools. This is the edit window here. Command equal toggles us to the mix window. This is our mix window. Right here is where we can see all of the views available, our inserts, our sends, our IO, our faders, our solos, our mutes, our track names, our comment section, all the stuff we talked about last week, okay? And then again, tracks bin, where we can show and hide certain tracks. Our clips bin, these bold names, these are our whole file clips. In other words, that's the audio that's recorded on the drive. And then these non-bold clips here, these are basically non-whole file clips. In other words, these are snippets that reference back to these bold clips. Okay, so here's the takeaway. The bold clips are whole file regions, and the non-bold clips are non-whole file region. The clips that aren't bold are non-whole files. In other words, these clips reference back to a clip or a portion of audio on the drive, but these non-bold clips are not audio themselves. They are just clips. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. So you see this says Samba Funk. You see that's bold there. Well, watch this. If I take the trimmer tool and I try to pull that back to trim, I can't go any further than that because that is the end of the audio file region. Okay, this clip here, look, if I try to, I'm taking the trimmer tool and I'm trying to edit that back, I can't because that's the end of the clip. But watch this. If I edit this clip, say here, now check that out. What I did was I hit Command T. So I made a selection and I hit Command T and I trimmed just to that selection that I made. But now watch, see that base 02 name? See how that's named base 02? Well, watch when I highlight this. You see this over here? See how it says base 02? That's a non-whole file clip. It's referencing this whole file clip here, but this is its own clip. Now watch, if I grab the trim tool, just my standard trim tool, and I start to pull back or trim back on this region, look, it goes back to where that original clip is because it is referencing the whole file clip. So I could actually trim that back to reveal the whole clip. So we talked about that last week, but just want to make sure that you got that. We talked about some of the tools here, the zoom tool. See, we can zoom in. We can also zoom using R and T. If you have command focus or keyboard focus here enabled, if I hit R, I will zoom out. And if I hit T, I will zoom in. Guys, bear with me 1 second. Be right back. All right. Sorry about the delay there. So what I was saying was I can use this zoom tool, right? And I can click and zoom in. I can hold Option and zoom back out. But as long as I have my keyboard focus enabled, I can use R to zoom out and T to zoom in. So that's a nice shortcut there. You don't have to use it, but it is a nice shortcut. Just like Command equal to toggle the mix in the edit window, R to zoom out, T to zoom in. Those are real nice, okay? Our trim tool, as we said, we can use that to trim regions. I can trim that region back. I can trim this region in, okay? There's also other types of trimmers that we'll talk about. Time compression trimmer we'll talk about later in the course. And the loop trimmer we'll talk about probably here in just a minute. Our selector tool, okay? Our selector tool, we use that to make a selection within a region. If I want to make a selection in the Samba Funk region, slip mode, I'll cover the modes here for you real quick. But if I'm in slip mode, I can just make a little selection here. I can make a selection here. Now, what I'm making here is an edit selection, okay? But you'll notice here that there's this little button right here called Link Timeline and Edit Selection, okay? Well, when this button is enabled, all right, which Shift / is the shortcut. Remember, you don't have to memorize any of these shortcuts. I'm just throwing them out. And when you go back through the archive, you can make note of it, or you can jot a quick note while we're talking here. But Shift / is Link Edit and Timeline Selection, or Link Timeline and Edit Selection. Okay, now watch. If that's lit, when I make an edit selection, watch the timeline right here. Remember, we're in a bars beats timeline. Here's our bars beats timeline here. Watch when I make an edit selection. See, I've made an edit selection here. And then up here, I've made a timeline. So I've linked my timeline and edit selection. Well, if this is turned off, I can click that, or I can hit Shift /. Now watch, if I make an edit selection, I'm only making an edit selection, but my timeline selection is the same. So let's do this. If I start at bar 5 and I go to bar 10, okay? Let's go to bar 9. Let's make it even. Okay? So my timeline and edit selection are not linked. So I've made an edit selection. This is my edit selection window here. But look, my timeline has not changed. I'll show you again. Look, if I make this my timeline selection, and then I come up here and I make a selection from 5-1 to 7-1. See, look, my edit selection is 2 bars, as you can tell here, but my timeline selection is the same as what I've grabbed that. So we won't go into detail any further right now because I want to take you directly into PTA 2, but just remember the idea that you can link the timeline and the edit selection, which most of the time you will, okay? But it can be unlinked for certain reasons. So we're going to go ahead and link that back. All right. So real quick, selector tool, I've made a selection in slip mode here. If I make a selection in grid mode, see, now you can see my grid. This little button here turns the grid on and off. So if you ever lose your grid lines and you're in grid mode, just remember, oh yeah, I have to click this little button to see my grid lines. Now that I have my grid set, if I make a selection from 5-1 to 7-1, see, I'm making my selections based on my grid. Well, let's look at something. My grid, I can have bars and beats, or I can have minutes and seconds. And all this stuff we'll go over again. I'm just giving you kind of like the flyby real quick. But we will cover this again. So bars and beats. So my grid, I'm saying my grid is 1 bar. Well, look, if I go into my main timeline, bar 5. Well, if I grab from bar 5 and I drag to the next grid line, that's bar 6. Look, 1 bar. Okay? So what if my grid is quarter note? Well, we start to see the subdivisions of the grid. So let's zoom in. There's 1 bar. So there's the quarter note right there. See, 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters equals 1 bar. Well, what if I make my grid 16th note? Well, now we see the subdivisions. So 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, right? So what does that make? That makes 1 beat. So if we go from 5/1 to 5/3, what's that make? 2 beats. Go to 5/4, 3 beats. Remember, we're talking about bars, beats, and ticks. And if we drag it out one more, there it is, 1 bar. So I'm just showing you, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get used to what you're seeing when you're adjusting your grid. But when you're selecting, when I'm using the selector tool and I'm in grid mode, I can select by the grid. Same thing if I'm on a clip, I can select by my grid value, right? But if I'm in slip mode, then if I want to land at 5/1, the likelihood that I actually land at 5/1 or at 5/2, see, when I'm in slip mode is slim. But if I'm in grid mode, then I can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to land on my grid. So spot mode, we use spot mode. We'll get into relative grid. Spot mode, we use that when we're spotting clips. We'll go into this in more detail, but let me just, like, if I grab, say, this piano clip here, and I drag this into the timeline in spot mode. So let's just look at it again. Here, this area here, remember, this is called the edit playlist. So if I was to grab this, say this punch in fill, let me do this because I know it's a little smaller, and I'm in slip mode. Well, if I pull this in slip mode, there, if I pull that in slip mode, it's just, this is just going to land anywhere on the grid, okay? But if I pull it in grid mode, then I can have it land somewhere on a specific grid location, all right? But if I pull it in spot mode, then I can just drop it anywhere on the timeline, and I could tell it I want that right at 5/1, and I could spot it. The other thing you can do is you can just, while it's in the playlist, you can click on it and say, no, I actually want that to go to 6/1. So just some ways to think about these modes that we're using. Again, we're going into more detail with the modes. I'm just giving you that first overview that either you go, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that, or that makes sense to me, or you go, oh, wait, I'm not totally sure. And if you have that feeling of like, oh, wait, I'm not totally sure, the next thought you need to have is, it doesn't matter because he's going to go over it again. We're going to get that in the assignment. So I'm just giving you some quick overview, remember. And then shuffle mode, we don't cover too much. It'll come up later on. But shuffle mode is a way that you can make edits and then have all the edits that are further down the timeline move closer to the beginning of the session. So let me show you that. Imagine that this, even though this is a baseline, imagine that this is a voiceover, okay? And this is like an audiobook read. And let's say that this phrase and this phrase are the same, but the VO talent read this phrase and didn't like it, or maybe the engineer said, hey, right about halfway through there, you said psychomagy instead of psychology, right? Whatever. But then the VO talent reread that line here. Well, instead of having to say, delete this out, and then grab the clip and try to slide it down and make it fit together, Pro Tools has made this a lot easier for you. All you need to do is just use shuffle mode, find the beginning edit point, find your end edit point, and then just hit delete. And you see it shuffles down. So let's just say that this was distortion here and you didn't want that in there, or just overmodulated. find your selection point. Watch this piece right here. Delete. So you see how it's shuffling down the timeline. So it works really great for dialogue, really, really great for audiobooks or any type of training material, that kind of thing. You do have to be careful that you're watching how you're moving audio, because anything that's further down the timeline here or that's in the edit playlist will keep moving. So let me show you that. So let me get our clip back here. So let's say I had this, just another copy of this here. Right? And say this was locked to a certain time location. Say that was exactly at 33:2:848. And I got in here and started editing in shuffle mode. Watch this clip right here. But if I edit this clip, see that clip moves. So we'll look at edit locking. What you need to do is you need to edit lock your clip. Then that way when I do edit in shuffle mode, this moves, but this clip does not move. You can work yourself into a serious mess if you're editing in shuffle mode and you're not locking clips that are further down in the timeline. All right, so that's probably enough rambling. I just wanted to kind of give you the general overview of some of the edit tools. The grabber tool, say I can just click on a clip and grab the whole clip, click on the clip, grab the whole clip. Or the selector tool, I'm making a selection in the actual clip. The scrub tool, I can scrub audio and listen for a specific start point or a specific spot in the waveform. And then my pencil tool, you use this for MIDI editing, which we'll get to. And we also use this a lot for automation. And we have a lot of different shapes that we'll look at with the pencil tool. Now, remember, your Monday night live sessions are very heavily weighted towards understanding how to remix your final project and remix tips and tricks. So John will be covering a lot of these tools in those live sessions, but I'll also give you some information related to the assignments using these different tools. So just remember, we're just covering the basic edit tools here, okay? These are your Zoom tools. You can mess with these. I can do my zoom left and right. I can enlarge or shrink the waveforms, the size of my waveforms, and then this will change the size of my MIDI notes here if I'm in my MIDI note editing, which we'll look at, okay? So, all right, good. Let's jump into the PTA assignment. Okay, let's stop for a second here. Let's stop for a second. I see a couple chat pieces. Before we jump right into the assignment, this will be a good stop point. I'm seeing a couple people saying they didn't get something this week, and I just wanted to clarify what wasn't received so I could answer that. And then, Cornelius, go ahead with the question real quick. Okay, so guys, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to email John Barry and request the archive. So all the audio that you need for the PTA2 is contained in the session, so there's nothing that you should need to upload. I think that's what the question's pertaining to. All the audio, once you open the session, all the audio is in the session. Huh, I keep losing my sound. Am I cutting out on everybody, or is it just Vincent? All right, so Vincent, it might be your bandwidth if you're on Wi-Fi. Okay, so I think I answered those questions, so let's jump into PTA2. So the first step we're looking at is, remember, these little bold titles give you an idea of what we're looking at. So we're talking about basic editing commands. All right, so what we're looking at is how do we repeat regions or how do we duplicate regions? And then how can we group regions to make them easier to edit with? So let's look at this. Here I am. I've got my basic session here, and I've got a clip. And what I want to do is I want to duplicate this clip. Say this clip plays back. So it's a drum loop, right? But it's only 2 bars. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate that. Now, just some of the ways that are not as efficient. If I take this, if I'm using my grabber tool here, and I hold Option and I click and drag, I can duplicate, I can make a copy of that. And you see I can do that again on the grid. If I try to do this in slip mode, I'm not going to be on the grid, and it's going to make a mess of what I'm trying to do. So really watch the mode that you're in. This is not something you're going to try to do in slip mode, because look, I'm at 24948. Well, what I really need to be at is 24960. I'm throwing that out there because down the road here, you'll understand about the grid resolution and the Pro Tools actual MIDI editing resolution. But when I say 960, watch this. 24948. I'm in spot mode, okay? 24948. Well, watch if I type in 24959. Okay? So here I am at 24959. Zoom way in. Go into grid mode. Here's 3-1, but here's 24959. Watch this. I'll click it again in spot mode. 24960. Watch where the front of this clip lands when I do this. Look, spots right on to 3-1. So that's just to give you an idea that 960 is actually the beginning of the next bar, because there's 960 tick resolution on the grid. Don't worry, that's going to come up again. All right, so I showed you how you can just click and drag on a clip, right? I click it with the grabber tool, I hold Option, I click, and I drag to make the copy. I can also duplicate. So I can Command D. Look up here, Edit, Duplicate, Command D, Command D, Command D, right? So I'm constantly hitting Command D. Well, up under the Edit menu, I can also repeat regions. Option R. So if I repeat, it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to ask me how many repeats do I want? Well, 1. I mean, in that case, you might just do Command D. But if you want a multiple, then you'd use repeat. Option R. Remember, we're talking shortcuts just as another element of learning Pro Tools. So Option R. And I'd say, oh, maybe I want 5 repeats. And then I could get the number of repeats. So remember, that's the one that's in there plus 5 more that I've repeated. Okay? So now, if I'm working in a file, let's do this. Let's just make it 5 just because it's more fun. So let's just say this. Let's say I'm making a song. Remember, I'm gonna talk in some hypotheticals here just for time's sake. But let's just say this is a verse, right? This is a verse or a portion of a verse with the drum loops behind it. This is one drum loop that's looping over and over. Okay? Now, if this is something I'm going to use further down in the song, and I want to take it down further in the timeline, I need to click these, highlight them all, hold Shift, and then drag them all together. Okay? And then if I wanted to do that again, I'd have to highlight them all, click with the grabber, hold Shift, click the end clip, and then go ahead and then make another edit there. But there's a faster way to do this. Once you have a certain group of clips together or a collection of clips together, and you want to group those, rather than consolidating them, later on we'll talk about consolidation. So if we look up under here, we see this function called consolidate clip. Okay, this is not what we want to do, but I'll just cover this real quick. If I consolidate this clip, look, it processes the whole thing, and it actually creates a new audio file called Drum Loop 01. Look over here in the clips bin. Remember I told you that the bold clips are actually audio files that are on the drive. Well, that's going to fill up our drive space a lot, and it's just a piece of audio that we don't need. And then when we go to clear excessive regions, we're going to have to really be careful about when we're clearing out the whole file regions. So I don't need to do it this way. So I'm going to undo that. Command Z, I'm going to undo it. Notice that the drum loop disappeared now. Okay? But I can use grouping. So I can highlight all those regions, and then under clip, I can use group. So remember, this is under the edit menu clip, or under the menu clip. Excuse me. I said edit menu. This is the edit menu. But the clip menu has the group function. Option Command G. Now when I do this, look, it calls it group 01, and then down here, you see this little group 01 that's been created. So now, see, it's telling me it's 2 channels as well. I could rename that if I want to. I could call that Samba Funk Group 01, whatever you wanted to name it, but then it actually changes names here. Now, if I copy this down and I'm working on it in the song, and I want to make some edits in there, I can just ungroup that. Option Command U. There's all the clips. Edit out what I don't want. Option Command G. Then you see down there I have Samba Funk Group 1, Group 2. So the gist is that you don't need to consolidate regions as you're working on them. You can repeat them. Option R, pick your number of repeats. And then you can highlight all your clips, and then you can Option Command G and group them. All right, so let's look at that one last step about looping. So instead of repeating, what we could do is we could use the loop tool. See, I'm highlighting the loop tool here. And then what I can do is I can loop this as long as I want. Now, see, if you notice here, here's my length. It's a 2-bar loop. So if I'm going to say, well, then I want an 8-bar loop, or I want 16-bar loop, then I can pull this and just watch to see. There's 16 bars right there. So be careful though, because in the assignment, we're telling you to repeat the Samba Funk region. So specifically, we want you to repeat it. You can use Command D, you can use Option R, you can use the loop tool, but specifically in the assignment, we want you to repeat the regions, okay? And then creating a group. So let's talk about monitoring modes real quick here. Pro Tools monitor modes. In Pro Tools, we have what's called auto input monitoring, and we have what's called input only monitoring. Now be careful when you're looking at these 2 monitoring modes in the track menu, because it can be a little bit deceiving. So when we're talking about input monitoring, or if we're talking about Pro Tools monitoring modes, remember, whenever you hear that word monitoring, think of what is coming out of my speakers, what is coming out of my headphone, what's coming out my monitors. Okay, so the monitoring mode. If we use Pro Tools in input only monitor mode, right now I'm selecting input only monitoring. This little green LED comes on here. Okay, and if I hover over this, you'll see that it says input monitor enabled. When that's enabled, the only thing that Pro Tools is monitoring is whatever is set to record at the input of your Pro Tools session. So if I have my bass track record enabled, Let me just set this to input 1, 2 right now. I'm going to set it to input 2 because input 1, I'll get feedback on my mic. All right, so if this is set at record, the only thing, if this button is record enabled, which look over here, you see this red button on top of this input monitor? This means that I have something record enabled in my Pro Tools system. You see it says track record enabled. Well, if I turn that off, you'll see that that red LED turns off. So if that's on, that means I have a track record enabled. So it's kind of like a global messaging system in a sense. I look up there, I see that I'm in input only monitor mode, and I have a track enabled. So right now, whatever is set to record at the Pro Tools input, whether it's my voice, whether it's a guitar or a bass, whatever is plugged into that input and recording is what Pro Tools is monitoring, which you do want sometimes. But as you'll see in this assignment, when we go to use something like quick punch mode, we want to use a different monitoring mode, which is called auto input monitoring. So remember, with input only monitoring, whatever is set to record at the input of the channel, whether it's instrument 2 or a guitar or a bass or whatever is showing up at this input is the only thing that Pro Tools was recording, whether Pro Tools is stopped, whether Pro Tools is recording, or whether Pro Tools is just playing back, okay? So let me see something here. Let me turn my monitors down. And let me do this. Let me create a new track. Remember, a good habit is to name your tracks as you create them. There's mic 1. Okay, so now you can see my voice is showing up in the monitor there. Remember this one? Control Option Command arrow down. Size all tracks to the screen. All right, so you see my voice there is in the meter. All right, it's a little hot. I would actually back that down if I was recording. I'll show you. You're going to lose a little level on my mic here, but I'm going to show you something. I would say probably that right there. You see my peaks are jumping up here. That right there, see that peak is hot. So right there, that's good level. You don't need to have your meters way up here where you're almost, that's clipping. That technically in analog is clipping. So even though my voice is fluctuating in your laptop, that's hot level right there. That's a good level. Get all your levels in your session there and get a great mix at these levels, even on any track, like just poking into the yellow right there. That's peaks right there. And then get your whole session mixed that way. Get a stereo mix, then bring it back into a new Pro Tools session, and then master from, being at maybe like your RMS is -10 or something like that. We'll get into that deeper in detail, but I'm just encouraging you not to max out all your levels. So let me get my levels back here so you can hear me. So input only monitoring versus auto input monitoring. So here I am. I have my Pro Tools input set up, and you see my vocal level here. It's a little hot, but I want you to be able to hear me too. So now if I hit playback, watch what happens. You're not going to hear any audio, but you can see what's going on by watching the screen. So I'm in record enable. The green light is lit, so I'm in input only monitoring. And I'm going to hit play. So when I hit play, imagine this. The music is playing, and I can hear the music in my headphones, and I'm just singing along, practicing, watching how my melody is going to go along or how my harmony is, and I'm recording. Totally fine. Now, if I'm just talking through the system, Pro Tools can hear me. And then if I hit record, now while I'm recording, you will see that my voice is coming through. Okay? In that scenario, everything's fine. But when we get into a quick punch scenario, that's where we're going to need auto input monitoring. So when I'm in auto input monitoring, which we have a step that requires auto input monitoring to be enabled, and we'll look at here. But let me just show you this. So remember, when I'm in input only monitoring with the green light lit, the only thing that's being monitored is the input that's record enabled. Now see, it says auto input monitoring. So that's not the mode that I'm in. That's the mode that I'm selecting now. So instead of picking this out of the track menu, I'm going to use the shortcut Option K. Now this is part of the assignment, so you're going to have to do this. But you see the input monitor is being toggled green, gray, green, gray. So green is input only monitoring. Gray is auto input monitoring. So what auto input monitoring allows to happen is that while Pro Tools is at a standstill, you can hear the voice coming through totally fine. And then if Pro Tools is playing back, look what's happening. Pro Tools is playing back, but you don't see my vocal being registered in the meter. That's because what Pro Tools is doing is while Pro Tools is playing back, it's thinking that it should be playing back some type of audio off the drive. So if there were already clips in here, okay, let me do this. Just imagine for a second that this is a clip, okay? And then I'm coming along here. Pro Tools is playing back. I'm talking. Nothing's coming out of the speakers at all. Well, if there were audio on this Vox 01, right now, while Pro Tools is playing back, that audio would be playing back off the drive, okay? So this is a mode that gets toggled with Quick Punch, and you're going to see this. So if this is a little bit of a jumble right now, it's going to make sense in a second. I think input only monitoring probably makes sense to you. If Pro Tools is toggled Option K into input only monitoring, whether Pro Tools is at a standstill, at a playback, or recording, whatever is active at the input on the channel will be monitored through your speakers or through your headphones. Okay? So auto input monitoring is while you're recording, your input is being monitored. But then as soon as recording is stopped, then audio is going to play back off the drive. And remember, we're going to get to that step here in just a second. So let me delete this because we don't need this. So pertaining to the assignment, demonstrate the shortcut for toggling monitoring modes. Remember, we know that there's input only monitoring and auto input monitoring. So demonstrate the shortcut for toggling monitoring modes and then complete the assignment with auto input monitoring engaged. So I'm toggling Option K and then I'm going to leave it gray. That's auto input monitoring. All right. So keep that in mind when we get to the Quick Punch step. Okay. So let's look at our next step. Our next step is recording in modes. So on the new bass track, whoops, remember Shift Spacebar toggles us back up to our previous page. Recording in modes on the new bass track, set the input to bus 2, then destructively record on the bass track between measures 9.1 and 11.1 480 exactly. So let's look at something here. Look at this is Pro Tools record transport, okay? So if I right click this, I can have normal record mode, loop record mode, destructive record mode, and quick punch record mode. Now, destructive record mode, the reason we want you to do this assignment in destructive record mode is because we really want you to understand the penalties of destructively recording. Because if you remember from week 1, one of the characteristics of a DAW is that it's non-destructive. So you can make all these edits and recordings and do whatever you want to do. And as long as you're careful, nothing gets destroyed. But if you're in a session and you're running out of drive space, which does happen sometimes, it can be very beneficial to destructively record because then you can eat up some of the previously recorded audio and not consume any more disk space. But it's something that you want to be very, very careful with. Okay, so a standard way to do a record selection would be this. So let's do this. Let's set the input to bus 2. And then let's look at recording, say, from 5.1. Remember making an edit selection, 5, 1, 5, enter, 2, 7, 1. A 2-bar edit selection, okay? So you see I have a 2-bar selection here. And if I hit record, okay, so nothing was recorded. We're going to look at that here in a section to see why nothing was recorded. But let's do that first so you can actually see what's going on here. So bass punch, there's bass punch, bass punch. You don't see this in the session, but this is what's happening. We have a pre-recorded slice of audio here. And the reason we want you to set the input here to bus 2 is because this bus is set bus 2. See the output, that's set to bus 2. So when you set this bus input to bus 2, when we get to this portion of audio, it plays out of this track into this track, and then we actually record a new snippet right into this clip. But real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this session and not save. And then I'm going to open it back up. Command-Shift-0 to open the previous session. Okay, so here we are. So if I want to see my I/O, remember I've got this little menu here. I can jump and look at my I/O. And I can set this to bus 2. Now let's just, for the fun of it, remember you don't have to show this in the assignment, but this is what's hiding in the background, is the bus punch. Nope, that's not what I want. Bass punch, excuse me. That's set to bus 2. That's set to bus 2. So if I open this up for playback and I hit playback here, I'm just making sure this works real quick. See, I'm in auto input monitoring mode. So what's happening is the audio off of this clip is playing. If I go into input only monitoring, option K, option K, see I'm in input only monitoring. So this is where the audio is going to play back. And I can show you that a lot easier here. Let me delete this real quick. Now watch, if I'm in auto input monitoring and I hit playback, see, look, I have my input monitoring enabled, my record enable, my input is record enabled. This audio is set to play out of bus 2 into bus 2. My track is record enabled, but I'm in auto input monitoring mode. So Pro Tools thinks that it should be playing back any audio that would be in this portion of the timeline. That's why, even though I have the bus routed and the input enabled, when I hit playback, I don't see anything at the input here. But now watch, if I enable, see, look, I'm selecting input only monitoring now. Now watch when I hit playback. This track is out bus 2, in bus 2 here. When this portion of the clip is playing, you'll see the meter here. But when it gets to this blank section where there's no clip, because this is routed into the track, you'll still see the meter moving in here because Pro Tools is playing back the audio that is showing up at the record input. So remember, since we're in input only monitoring, the only thing that's coming out of the speakers is what's at the record input. So you're not going to see the meters here, but you are going to see the meters when this audio passes through. Look, no audio. Now you see it playing through. Watch. No audio, and even right here, no audio. So again, it might be settling in as a mishmash, but eventually it will make sense. And then when we get to the next step, that's where you really see auto input monitoring make a lot of sense. But let's look at this destructive record. So I want to kind of show you what would happen in normal record mode when you did this maneuver, and then what would happen in destructive record mode, how we want you to record it. So let's go into normal record mode. Now I'm going to hide the bass punch. Hey, how we doing? Am I completely confusing anyone, or is this starting to settle in and make sense? Because sometimes this monitoring mode thing, along with this recording stuff, can feel a little convoluted at first. Okay, good. If you're drifting in and out of confusion, that's actually good. That's actually good, because I promise you when we get to Quick Punch, things will get a lot clearer. All right. Hey, guys, and if you get to the end of the session and if you don't understand it, send me an email, let me know, and I'll help clarify it, okay? So right now, I'm in input-only monitoring mode. I need to toggle Option K to get into auto input monitoring, so I'm following the guidelines properly. So now it's grayed out. I'm in auto input monitoring. Now I've got my input set to bus 2. Remember, when I first got here, it was at no input. So I need to set this to bus 2 because now you know that hiding in the background is a bass punch set to output at bus 2, but you don't need to show that in the assignment. So I'm going to record enable my track. Now remember, this step needs to take place in destructive record mode, but I want to show you what happens when you make the recording in normal record mode. So let's say I want to record from 9.1 to 11.1. Okay, 2 bars. So you see I have that selection up here. So if I have my selector in this playlist, see how I make my edit selection here? Now watch when I enter in my data here. 9.1 to 11.1. See how the edit selection moved here to follow my data that I entered up here in this event edit window? All right, so now if I just hit record, okay, if I just hit record, which I'm going to use Command Spacebar. If I just hit record, it's going to record, but watch what happens. A new clip shows up, new bass 05, and if I go into the clips bin, look, there's a new whole file clip, new bass 05. Well, that's a problem if I'm trying to use destructive record because I've just used more disk space. So the idea of this assignment is to get the recording in place but not use more disk space. So we're going to use destructive record mode. So I'm going to right-click the transport, select destructive record, okay? You can also find up here in your options menu, your destructive record, your loop record, and your quick punch. Okay, notice that these two have a shortcut, but destructive record does not have a shortcut. So we're going to right-click to find that shortcut. Or to find that mode, excuse me. Right-click is like our little mini modifier type of shortcut here. Now, my input is set to bus 2. My input is record enabled. And then I've made my selection here, 9.1 to 11.1, 2 bars. All right. Now, if I hit record, looks exactly the same, but watch what happens. Excuse me. Look, no new clip has been created because the audio that was on the drive from 9.1 to 11.1 has been written on top of. It's that old audio was destroyed and the new audio replaced that section of audio in the audio file. So remember, you want to use destructive record mode. When you make your selection, you do that up here in your event edit window, 9.1 to 11.1. Remember to follow exactly, it's 480 that you want to pick. And then make sure you're in destructive record mode. Boom, we record. Everything's fine. Also remember, you need to move memory locations. I'm still seeing a couple students turning in assignments. Not anyone that's in this class because you're just getting to week 2 here, but in prior months, for some reason, when we start using these memory locations, there's some students that forget. If you don't see the memory locations, up under Window, Memory Locations, you need to navigate through the different memory locations for each step of the assignment. So let's go to location 2. So this is where we get into quick punch, and this is where we'll make a little bit more sense of auto input monitoring. So here's our flute track. Flute's already recorded. Now again, what you don't see in the background is this flute punch. And if I bring this flute punch underneath here, you'll see that there's a flute punch. See the flute punch name here for phrase 1 and a flute punch for phrase 3. So when we're performing quick punch, there's already a flute recording in the background. You don't need to buy a flute or rent a flute to perform this step of the assignment. So I'm going to hide that flute punch, but you'll know where the audio is coming from. So notice that the output of the flute punch is routed to punch bus, and the input of the flute track that you see, the input is routed to punch bus. So when I hide that flute punch, you can still see that the input is set to punch bus. And so I need to punch the first phrase and the third phrase. Okay. Now I'm going to turn up my speakers so you can hear this. Okay. Now I'm in destructive record mode. I can right click this and pick quick punch. I can come up to my options menu and select quick punch, or shift command P. Shift command P. Now notice something. If I'm in destructive record mode and I hit shift command P, I'm in quick punch. But if I hit shift command P one more time, I'm in normal record mode. So just sometimes you can think of ways, because if you look up in the options menu, there's no choice for normal record mode here. Okay? So let's say this. If I was in, which we'll look at this mode next week, option L, I'm in loop record mode. Option L, I'm in quick punch. Command shift P, I'm in quick punch. Command shift P, I'm in normal record mode. But if I'm in destructive record mode, I can go to option L for loop record mode, and then option L to go back into normal record mode. So it's just a way that you can't go directly into normal record mode, but you can turn quick punch or loop record on and then use the same quick key again or same shortcut again, and then turn that mode off. So you don't need to worry about all these shortcuts as you're learning Pro Tools, but as you become more proficient, that's how you become more efficient, because you become proficient to the point where you want to start to add on to your skill set. So let's look at flute punch here. So I get to the memory location and I need to record enable my track. Okay. Now, once I'm record enabled, I need to punch the first phrase and the third phrase, right? So I was at location 1, I'm at location 2. Now notice that the clip is already highlighted. Okay. So if I jump into record enable by clicking the record enable button or hitting shift R, I'm pretty much set up to record, but I need to make sure that I'm in quick punch mode. So instead of right clicking, I'm going to use command shift P. Now I'm in quick punch. So for quick punch, what I do is I hit space bar. I can use this transport here. I could just hit play and then click P to punch in and then click P to punch out. Right? So you heard the flute punch play through, because remember, we have audio in the background. So when I punched in, this is the audio that was playing through to record into this track. Then when I punched out and played back, it was this audio playing out of this piece of the playlist. And then when I punched in again here, it was this audio that was recording through into this playlist. Okay, so let me show you real quick about our monitor mode. Now, when I'm in auto input monitoring and I punch, so that's recording. Then I punch out. Now you'll hear this audio playback. Okay. Now, but watch if I'm not in auto input monitoring. So option K, it's green. I'm in input only monitoring. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to punch, and then I'm going to punch out, and then watch what happens in this when it passes by this second phrase here, okay? So you notice that the audio that was on the drive didn't play back because the only thing that was being monitored, the only thing that was coming out of the speakers was the audio that was showing up at the record input. Okay? Let's look at it one more way here. Let me just copy this and let me paste it right here. Okay? Now watch this. Here, well, actually, let me undo my punches. All right. So here now the other way I can do this is I can hit space bar to play back and then command space bar to punch in. So space bar to play back and then command space bar to punch in and out. All right, so you see what happened. We heard audio play back through this section because this flute audio was here. But if that flute audio is not there and I'm in input only monitoring mode, I don't hear any audio. So let's just back up real quick. Let's go to location 1. Okay, so here, let's look at it in terms of the assignment. Boom, I'm at location 2. The clip is already highlighted. Shift R, I record enable. I'm already in quick punch mode. I would actually be in destructive record mode if I was coming out of location 1. Location 2, my clip is highlighted. Shift R, I'm record enabled. Command Shift P, or just right click it to select the punch mode. And then I'm going to hit spacebar to play back and then command spacebar to punch in. So I'll call it out as I go. So spacebar, command spacebar, holding command, spacebar, still holding command, command spacebar, and then just hit spacebar on the way out. Now the only difference is that I wasn't in input only monitor or auto input monitoring mode. So you need to be in auto input monitoring mode from that last step. So we would toggle it to show our shortcut. We would make sure that it's grayed out. Jump to location 2. The clip is highlighted. Shift R. I'm record enabled. If I was still in destructive record mode, Command Shift P, jump into quick punch mode. And then again, the first time I used the transport to punch in and out, but this time I'm using the space bar in conjunction with command. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting the space bar to start, and then I'm holding command, and then I'm clicking the space bar to punch in, and then while I'm still holding command, I'm clicking the space bar to punch out. And then I'm still holding command, I'm clicking the space bar to punch in, and then when I get to the end of that third phrase, I'm just hitting the space bar to hit stop. So again, space bar to play back, hold command, hit the space bar. Still holding command, hit the space bar. Now you heard that phrase, hold command, hit the space bar. Now I just hit the space bar. So that can take a little bit of practice. Don't get frustrated if you're actually working on your screen recording and you're fumbling with that and you mess a few up and you're there for 5 minutes or so trying to get that step down. It's fairly easy, but it does take a little bit of practice. And then the last thing to remember is that if you were actually working on a punch-in scenario or an editing scenario at the end, you would come in here and you would probably clean this out. You would actually clean all this dead space out. And then you'd be coming in here and you'd be creating your fades. So Command F, equal gain, equal power. Let's say I'm going to use an equal gain here. Click OK. Command F, click OK. Highlight everything in there. Command F, and let it go ahead and create all my fades for me. So you don't have to do that in the assignment, but in a real world scenario, you would actually be going in there and editing out all of the superfluous space between the phrases, maybe not all the breaths, but certainly any of the dead space where there was room noise, and then also making sure that you had no pops or clicks and the necessary fades that would need to be created. Okay. So let's look at another function here. If I look at here, get out of record enable there, let's look at this R&B 1 bar clip here. Let's solo this out. It's a drum loop. Okay. So this next step, okay, we did the quick punch, right? We did our quick punch. We've even left you notes in here. I'm backtracking real quick here. We've left you notes here. The fact that the proper routing has already been established, the input has already been routed. I showed you that. And then the idea that both punches must be clean phrases. So if you miss a punch, then you need to go back in there and trim those punches. Let's look at that so nobody's confused. Let's let those fill back in. So let's say here that I was recording here, and I was making my second punch and I missed it. Okay, well right there I missed that punch. Well, the beauty of quick punch is that as soon as I hit playback, in the background, Pro Tools is actually already recording in the background. Okay, so that's this clip here. So Pro Tools is already recording in the background. So this little piece that I look like I missed here, I actually didn't miss it. Pro Tools recorded it. And if I come in here and I grab my trimmer tool, my standard trim tool, and I pull this little clip back, you'll notice that there it is. So I just want to see something here real quick. Okay, I'm pulling back as hard as I can. So that was where I started playback. Let me show you that again. I really want you to see this because this is actually something that's really cool. So I'm going to start playback from right here, okay? I'm in quick punch. And then I'm going to deliberately miss the punch. But watch here. Let's do this. Let's start exactly at 25. So look, I click in the main counter. I type in 25. I'm at 25.1 right now. So I'm going to hit spacebar, and then I'm going to miss the punch. Okay, so I missed the punch. You see this says flute 3501. Well, look right here. There's a bold clip. So that's a whole file clip called flute 35. Well, it's called 3501 because 35 is the whole file clip. All right, so let's just see if we can fake this. Actually, here I can do that even better. Watch. I'll go into spot mode. And then I'll just drag it here, and then I'll just tell it to go to 25.1. So look, there's the clip. That's the punch that I made. So when I go to trim this back, I know that from wherever I started playback, Pro Tools was recording. So I just pull that back a little bit. That's a clean punch. And then at the most simplest maneuver, Command F, boom, crossfade. It's clean. All right, so I kind of went all over the place there, but does that make sense to you about how Quick Punch starts recording as soon as you play back? And then the idea that we want to make sure we're trimming any missed punches. If during the assignment, I would highly encourage you to make clean punches. But if you don't make clean punches, then you need to go back and trim those punches because you're understanding that since you were using Quick Punch, that audio was recording from the start of playback. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. It seems to be a unanimous yes. And if you're confused, remember, when you go in and review this live session again on the archive, or when you go in and watch the the PTA2 prep session, then you'll get that refresher. But if it doesn't make sense for some reason, shoot me an email. We'll try to clarify it, okay? All right, so let's go back to this R&B 1 bar. We're talking about a drum loop here. I'm going to solo this out. I play it back. It's a drum loop. Okay. So in our guidelines here, it's saying on the R&B track, locate the region named R&B 1 bar. There it is, R&B 1 bar. Separate at each transient on the R&B 1 bar region. You will see 12 individual separated regions when completed, okay? Now, this is a tool we're going to talk about here called tab to transient. That's this little tool right here, okay? Now, when this is turned off, we're talking about the tab key on your keyboard. In other words, on your QWERTY keyboard, just to the left of the Q on your keyboard, you see the tab button. Obviously, you know about tab from when you're tabbing in letters to start a letter, or tabbing in the beginning of a paragraph or something like that. Okay, guys, I'm going to ask again, am I cutting in and out on everybody, or is it just individual classmates? Okay, so I think this is a result of Wi-Fi. If you're watching the live session on Wi-Fi right now, that can cause bandwidth issues sometimes, but just hang tight and the buffer should fill back up. But I know it does get to be a concern when you're trying to hear what's going on and you're starting to hear that audio cut in and out. All right, good. So it's working fine now. So what we're talking about is this tab to transient tool. So if this is turned off and I'm hitting the tab key on my keyboard, watch what happens. So here's my insertion point. Anytime I click in the playlist here, so if I click here, you see 19.4.498. That's an insertion point. I click here, 22.299. That's an insertion point, okay? So I click here. My insertion point is somewhere in the timeline. If I hit tab, it's going to jump to the front of the R&B 1 bar region. You see my insertion point is 21.1. Now watch. If I highlight this clip, you'll see that the beginning of the clip is at 22.1. So with my tab key, I tab up, I'm at 21.1. Tab to transient is not enabled right now. If I hit tab again, you see I tab to the beginning of this next clip. And then watch, if I hit tab again, watch down here at the end of this clip here, watch the counter. So I tab to the end of that clip. So without tab to transient enabled, see it's enabled, it's not enabled. So when it's not enabled, what I do is I tab to the beginning and end of clips. So I'll tab, I've tabbed to the beginning of the clip, tab again, I'm at the end of the clip, the beginning of the next clip, tab again, I'm at the end of the clip, beginning of the next clip, tab again, I'm at the end of the clip. Now, if I turn tab to transient on, and my insertion point is outside the clip, if I hit tab, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to tab up to the beginning of the clip. But if I hit tab again, then it's going to jump to the beginning of the transient. Now here's something to be careful about. This is so close to the start of the transient here that Pro Tools is sensing that the beginning of this clip is the beginning of the waveform. Okay, but if we were actually really editing, what we'd want to do is we want to make sure that we were really editing right at the front of the clip. So we may want to come in here and get real surgical and look right at the beginning of the waveform, okay? But for the exercise, you don't need to get in that far. So with tab to transient enabled, I tab up, I'm at the first transient. If I tab again, see I'm at the transient of the next waveform. Tab again, I'm at the next transient. Tab again, I'm at the next transient. So you see I'm tabbing to transient. So it's a great way to find the start of a drum hit, say. Now notice this. When I'm tabbed up against that transient and I hit spacebar and you hear the snare drum, as soon as I hit the spacebar again, it's jumping back to the transient. So I don't lose that insertion point. But this button right here, this is called insertion follows playback. So remember, I talked about the insertion point being wherever my cursor, if you will, is clicked in the playlist. Well, if I tab up to the waveform, my insertion point is 22.1. So if I have my insertion follow my playback, as soon as I start playback, wherever I stop, the insertion is going to stop. See, there's my insertion. So now I have to go back, tab again, hit play, stop, go back, tab again, hit play. So if insertion follow playback is turned off, once I tab up to a transient, then I don't have to worry about reselecting it. Same thing as if I was to make a loop. Let me make a quick little loop to show you something. So let's say I'm tabbing up here. Now if I hold Shift Tab, I'll highlight to the next transient. Let me do this here. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, so I got a little almost 1 bar loop here, right? Now insertion follows playback is turned on right now. I hit spacebar. See, I lose the selection. But if I turn it off, now play the loop, and then I hit spacebar because it's turned off, I don't lose the edit selection, okay? So if I wanted to edit this into 12 separate clips, what I could do is I could tab to every transient. So tab. Now if I hit B, I will separate at that insertion point. So B, I separate. Tab again. B, I separate. Edit. Tab. B. Tab. B. Tab. B. Tab. B. Tab. So you see what I'm doing? I'm tabbing at every. I'm tabbing to the transient, and then I'm hitting B to separate. Tab. B to separate. Now the other function we can use is edit at selection. Command E does the same thing. Since our selection is just the insertion point. See, this is a selection like this. Well, an insertion is a selection too. Look at this. I make a selection. You see the blue arrow here? This blue arrow right here? That's 21.2.761. 21.2.761. You see this blue arrow here? That's 22.3.934. That's a start and end selection. You see edit selection end, edit selection start. Well, just as much as those arrows being separated are start and end points, if I click in the playlist, like let's say here, I tab, here I am up against the transient, you see the two arrows are together? My timeline selection point is 22.1.481. Look, the start selection is 21.1.481, and the end selection is 21.1.481. That's why when I say edit, separate, clip at selection, it just separates right at the insertion point. So the faster way to do that, I tab, and then I just hit B for separate. Tab, B, separate. Okay, so I've gone beyond the edit point at this point. So let's back up, and let me show you the slow way to do this. B, B, tab, 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 B, right? Tab to transient, B to separate. Tab, B, tab, B. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's a faster way to do this. The whole point of me going through all that is to make sure you understood about tab to transient, okay? But there's also a faster way to edit at transients, especially with strong transients like drum loops. I'm just going to highlight that clip. I'm going to go to edit, separate clip at transients. Now I get a pre-separate amount. If I was dealing with something with not as strong transients, say if I was dealing with strings, or maybe even like a trumpet or a sax or cymbals or brushes on a snare or something like that, then I may want to try to be careful to make a pre-separate amount. But if I don't select a pre-separate amount and I just click OK, then rather than having to tab to every transient, Pro Tools is going to detect the transients and then separate for me. There's my edit selections, and if you count them again, you'll see that there's 12 separated clips there. All right, so let's look at our fades real quick. We need to make a fade at the end of the clip here. That's the next step in the assignment. On the R&B track, create an equal power fade out from measure 31. So let's just say here, measure 31. I'm not at measure 31. I need to select in the timeline here, 31. Now I'm there. See, I'm in slip mode, but since I've selected in my main counter, I am at 31 because I know because my main counter is telling me so. But if I just click in the timeline here near 31, I lucked out. So I may not land right on 31, so I need to select it in my main counter. So I can actually do that when I'm down here. Once I've separated at transients, okay, I can just jump up in the main counter and hit 31. And now I'm right there at 31. So I need to be careful though, because I need to select from 31 till the end of the clip. If I just grab in here with the selector tool and click and drag, look what happens. I lose my 31-1 timeline selection. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift and then click. And then drag. Okay? Now the easier way to do this is I'm at 31. I'm going to just type in 31. I'm at 31. And then I can turn tab to transient off. And then if I just hit Shift Tab, then I'm going to highlight to the end of the region. So I can jump to 31 here. And then I can hold Shift. I would do it this way. Just make sure you don't have tab to transient enabled and hit Shift Tab. Okay? Or if you're in grid mode, you could pretty much click in at 31 and then drag over to the end of the clip. And then we just hit Edit, Fades, Create Fade. Now it's asking for a particular type of fade. It's saying create an equal power fade. We'll look at equal power fade. Look at equal gain, right? Equal power. So in equal power fade, you see this boost here? Look at the A point and then look at the B point. And notice that there's an arc here. What this does is it creates a 3 dB boost at the center of the fade. Okay, so if we were to draw a straight line across here, we would notice that there was a 3 dB boost here. Okay, just a very, very, very slightly perceptible boost in the fade. Okay, this helps to say maybe not make the fade not as perceptible, whereas an equal gain fade may be a little bit too fast, if you will. So if you'll notice equal gain, see equal gain is equal from the start to the end of the fade. Equal power is a 3 dB boost at the middle of the fade. So I click OK. Now I created my fade out. All right, so on the bass track, edit lock the bass group region group as shown. This is step 7. We're getting close here. Step 7, the bass track. Watch this. Option F, I've centered everything. You see I was off center there. I'm off center, Option F. I center my selection. Look, if I was to make a selection here and hit Option F, watch what happens. It's going to zoom in just to that selection. So just a way that you can even things out in your screen. So if I highlight that, I can't see where I'm going, Option F, I center my selection. So I need to lock this clip. I showed you this before. I can edit lock and I can time lock. Now, time lock, you got to be careful because time lock can mess you up. Let's do this. Copy, paste. All right, so oops. Unlock. Command Option L is the shortcut. All right, so look, if I time lock this clip, right? I've time locked that. And then I come in here and I edit. See? The clip doesn't move. But if I come in here and edit here, you see what happened? It's allowing me to edit this and it's not restricting my edits. That's why I like edit lock better. We don't even need this here. That was just for example. So if I highlight this clip and I edit lock, okay, now if I try to go in here and edit, I get this message that it's going to affect a lock clip. So edit lock is a little more restrictive. So that's a very simple Command L, clip, lock, Command L, lock. Super simple. All right, so let's talk about this punch in. We punched in on the flute track, but this is a little more related to a quick example of a drum comp. So let's jump to location 3 here. I think this works best if I show you the full scope of what's going on. If I delete this punch in fill and I grab this clip here with the trim tool, okay, so this is what originally happened. If we listen to this back, listen to this drum fill. Okay, now it's just not the best drum fill. But what we did was, so you saw that first clip, that was one complete recording. Well, the drummer said, you know what, I'm not happy with my drum fill. I want to go back and I want to punch that in. So the engineer hit playback, and then at the proper punch in point, he punched in here, and then he punched out, but the punch out was a little bit late. So if we listen to the punch in and the punch out, you'll hear a nice drum fill, but you'll hear that the crash cymbal around 37.1 is off. So it's a little bit off. So what we need to do is we need to pull this back. We need to trim back to 37.1 so that we can hear that crash cymbal at 37.1. So here's grid mode. Here's 37.1. Now here's the punch in fill, you can see goes past 37.1. So what I need to do is I need to grab my trim tool. Remember back when we were looking at the flute punch, you saw how we could trim back a little bit and the audio was still there. Well, The punch-in record went over. Well, because we know it's non-destructive, the original recording is still up under here. This original complex drum loop recording is still up under here. So all I need to do, rather than being in slip mode and just freehand pulling back, which in a real world editing scenario, you could do that, because if I zoom in here, here's 37.1, right? Here's 37.1. So if I trim back here, see, I'm at 36.4,959. I'm almost at 37.1. If I play that back, it's fine. But see, it's called using tools and modes. And we talked about the different modes: shuffle mode, spot mode, slip mode, and grid mode. Well, slip mode works for editing, but in this step, we want you to think about working with your modes. So hint, hint, we want you to jump into grid mode for this edit to make it as precise as possible, because it says on the downbeat of measure 37.1, there's a full crash symbol. So if I jump into grid mode, look, I'm just hitting option 4 and jumping into grid mode, or I could just click it. I grab my trim tool, and look, all I have to do is just kind of click and drag it. I mean, I just barely snapped it to the left. I just got up there and then dragged it and snapped it, and it jumped right into 37.1. And if I play this back, okay, and then remember, in the real world editing, once you were done, you'd create your fades. Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward, just real quick trim and a punch and making sure you're thinking about the mode that you're in. Okay, this is really straightforward. I believe John would have covered using memory locations to lay out your song in last week's live session. This is just a real quick review of creating, deleting, and updating memory locations. So let's take a look at creating memory locations. Let's go to memory location 4. Remember to watch the location you're at. You know, if you'll notice right here, memory location 4, memory location 3. So we're giving you an idea of what memory location is used for each editing scenario. So let's go to memory location 4. All right. So last week you learned about adjusting track heights, and we adjusted all track heights to large. Well, right here, we only want you to adjust one track height. So if I move with semicolon, if I move down to the master track, and remember, Control Option is what we use to control all track heights. If I just hold Control and use my up-down arrows, I can control a single track height. So remember, I told you if we were at medium track height and we squished all the way, that's micro. If you squish all the way, arrow down, that's micro. So remember I said you count 1, 2, 3, 4. That's large. So you can memorize your track height. So make sure you pick the right track height, okay? We're not going to use micro, we're going to use mini. It's easy to get confused on that. So there I'm at micro, one click. And go to, hold on. Mini, boom. So I squish it all the way down, one arrow up, that's mini. All right, so then I need to make a memory location at a very specific location, 45.1. Well, I can do that by clicking at 45.1 in the timeline, here, like that. Or I can just jump up into my main counter. If I was at, say, 47.1 and I wanted to be at 45.1, I could click in the main counter and go to 45.1. So you could pick what you want to do. Now, once you actually create the memory location, look, you see I have location 1, delete me location 2, but I don't see any of these memory locations up here. That's because I need to show them markers. Then there they are. There's delete me. So now I need to create a location at 45.1. So let me just grab this little menu here. I could say new memory location. All right. The other thing I could do is right here in my markers lane, I could just click this little plus sign and I get the same new memory location dialog. And let's say I'm not going to name this the way it wants to be named in the assignment, but I'm going to call this location 45. Okay. And then I can pick if I want a marker, which then I would see the little flag in the timeline there. I could make it a selection if I wanted to. Let me show you that. So let's say I'm just going to grab any random spot here, okay? And then I'm going to click this marker, and I'm going to say I want that to be a selection, and then I'll save my track show and hides and my track heights. Okay? There it is. You see right there, it says 43.1. So if I jump to location 4 out of it, and then I come back to 43.1, you'll see that that selection has been saved. So I can always get back to that selection. So that could work if you were working on an edit and wanted to maintain that edit selection while you were moving around the session. Okay? But that's not what we want to do. We just want to create a marker, okay? Like a location in a song marker. So I'm going to go to 45.1, and then I'll just click here. Remember, I can use this menu here, new memory location, or I can just click here, and I'll call this location 45. Watch how you're supposed to name it in the guidelines. And then I'm going to pick to keep my track heights. Now, remember, you can pick your general properties. You can save your zoom settings. You can save your track shows and hides, your track heights. I'll keep track heights and click OK. There's my location 45. So if I go back to the beginning of the session, there's location 1. Well, if I click on location 45, boom, see, I've jumped back to that location. If I jump to delete me, there I am at delete me. Let me go back to location 45, location 1, location 45. So because I don't have all my zooms set up and things like that, that's why I'm losing these locations. I could just zoom in here, and that's about where I need to be. So all I'm doing is just basically creating a memory location. Let's just look at it one more time. I'm at 45.1. I click my plus sign. I name the location how it's supposed to be named in the guidelines. I save my track heights. I click OK. Further down the timeline, in a real world scenario, if I wanted a location at 66.1, I could just type in 66.1, create a new location, pick my parameters that I wanted to save. Actually, here, let me do this. Like that. And then let's say I created my new location, and then I saved my track show and hide and my track height and my zoom setting. Okay, go back to location 6. Go to location, watch to see my view. There's location 7 where I had the track height changed. Go back to location 6. So you get the gist. Now look, if I want to delete that location that I made, look, hold Option and then click. I deleted that one. And then I need, for the assignment, I need to delete the memory location here. So now what I can do is I can hold Option and I can click on this memory location here, right? Or I can hold Option and I can delete off of the memory location floating window, okay? Or I can select the memory location, and then from this menu, I can clear the delete me location. So there's 3 different ways I can do that. All right, and then I need to update a location. So that's the first 2, creating memory locations. There's an ABC directive in there, and then deleting memory location, and then updating memory locations. Now watch this carefully because this gets missed quite a bit. Notice here it's saying update memory locations, show all tracks, set all tracks to small heights, and then update memory location 5 to include new changes. Okay, so right now all the tracks aren't showing because look in the track spin here. We have bullets that are grayed out. So all the tracks aren't showing. So what I need to do is click this caret and say show all tracks, right? Or what I need to do is I just need to hold Option and then click a bullet, and then I'll show all tracks. So now all tracks are shown. And then I need to set all my tracks to small height. Well, remember, Control Option, arrow down, squish them all, micro, mini, small. Check your track heights. small. So there I am. So if you can get to micro, then you just have to think you're at micro, and then every time you tap, you're moving a track height. So I'm all the way squished. I'm at micro, mini, small. And I can just look at them, check them. Yep, I'm at small. Now, here's the trick. You can't move back to location 4 to finish up, because when you go back to location 5, because the last step takes place at memory location 4. In this step, we're updating 5, but this last step takes place at location 4. You can't go back to 4 without updating location 5, because look what happens. There's nothing there. So you have to be careful. So you're at location 4. We're going to show the tracks, change the track heights, and then update location 5. So I'm at 4. I hold Option. I show all the tracks. Control Option. Squish them all. 2 taps. Mini, small, right? I check. Yep, got the track heights. And then I need to actually right-click the location 5. Now you see this popped up because I right-clicked it. And then I can say, okay, I don't need to change any other parameters, but I know since I right-clicked it, I'm updating it. I click OK. Now look what happens. I go back to location 4, go back to location 5. Boom. See, I'm there with my changes. Now let's go back to location 4 again. Let's show all tracks. Control Option, squish them all to mini, squish them all to micro, mini, small. Now look at this. If I try to go to update, see, it's wanting me to update location 4. But if I click on location 5, see, I've already updated that location, so it's going to, let's do this. Let me do this. All right, there. So location 4. When I want to update that location like I was showing you, I can't move to a different location, because if I do that, I go back to the way the location was set up. So let's just set it up the way it was. Go back to location 4. So if I need to update location 5, right? And I change these heights, and I want to go in there and I want to use this menu to update location 5, I can't, or edit location 5, I can't. So what I need to do is if I want to do it this way, if I want to use this menu, I need to actually select the location 5, then I need to show all the tracks, and then I need to change my track height. So I'm at mini, small, I'm at micro, mini, small, okay? Now, when I click this little caret, now I can edit location 5. Rather than right-clicking, I can select it out of the menu. And then I'll click OK, and then you'll notice that my changes took place. So I hope that made sense. I was just telling you to be careful, because if you're at location 5, if I'm at location 4, and while I'm at location 4, I show all tracks, and I set my track heights properly, and then I right-click 5, I can update it, okay? But if I'm at 4 and I make those changes, and then I want to edit location 5 out of the menu, I can't do that, because as soon as I click the location, I'm gonna lose everything that I did in 4. So in this scenario, then I would have to change my track heights. Then I could go in here and edit 5 and click OK. Does that make sense? I mean, I kind of went, 3 different directions to get to the same result, but I want to make sure that that made sense to you. Yep. Let's just look at it one more time, because I think everybody's got it. So I'm at location 4. When I'm at location 4, here. Okay. So if I'm at location 4 and I show all tracks, and then I change the heights to where they need to be set, I double check. From this point, the only thing I can do is right-click location 5. and then click OK. Because if I select location 5, I'm going to lose all those changes. But if I'm at location 4 and I want to do it a different way, I could select location 5, then I could show all tracks, then I can make my track height adjustments, and then I could either right click there or I could pick from the menu to edit location 5 and click OK. So I think that makes sense to everybody. All right, and then the last one, remember, we go back to location 4. We go back to location 4. Now this is just a quick review of moving tracks, making sure we're placing tracks correctly on our timeline, and then understanding how to spot tracks. And if you can place regions the way we want you to in step A, and then you can spot regions the way we want you to in step B, this will give you a great introduction into moving regions around in Pro Tools. So what I need to do is I need to select the displayed regions between measures 46 and 58 and move them to measure 45.1. Well, this is pretty simple. Now look, you see the regions aren't all in view here. Option F, not quite in view. But if I select this R&B region and hit Option F, then they're centered. It's just a better way to look at them on the screen. If I take my grabber tool and I hold Shift, oops, I didn't hold Shift. If I hold Shift, then I can select all those regions below, okay? But the other thing I can do is with this keyboard focus enabled, I can hold Shift and then use semicolon, and I can highlight all the regions down the playlist. If I had the triangle clips highlighted and I held Shift and hit P, I can highlight all regions up the playlist, okay? So you don't have to do it that way. When you get back to location 4, what I would do is select the R&B region and then hit Option F just so you can center it, makes it easy. And then you can just hold Shift and select these regions, okay? Or you can hold Shift and hit semicolon and highlight all those regions. Now look, they're at 46. Well, I'm in grid mode, so I could just grab them and then slide them over to 45.1. You see that I'm at 45.1 here. The other thing I could do is I could use spot mode, and all the regions are highlighted, or all the clips are highlighted. Click 45.1, not 445, 45.1, boom, and they spot to the location. So that's pretty straightforward. I mean, you get the idea. If you had one clip somewhere in the timeline and you wanted to move that to a certain bar beat location, you could use spot mode or you could use grid mode. Slip mode would be if you were trying to say like pocket something, like say like with this bass clip. If let's say that this section of the audio was like a little off here, right? Let's say we had this little section. Remember Command E, edit at selection. That little piece there, I could, in slip mode, I could just grab this clip. I mean, this would be, you'll see a better way next week, but I could just kind of like slip this over like a little bit to try to get it to fit in a little better, okay? But if you're placing regions, you wouldn't do that in slip mode. You would do it like I showed you. You would use grid mode and click and drag the clip to its location, or you would use spot mode and you would just type in your bar location. So now spotting clips, we want you to spot this snare clip here. So this, as you notice, it's not bold. So this is a non-whole file clip here. And now what we want you to do is we want you to drop this into the R&B track. Now we have a specific location, 46.4.720. Okay, so let's look at something here. Let's look at our grid mode, bars and beats, and let's look at our 16th note grid, okay? Now you'll notice here, you see the grid lines? You see our grid lines? Now this is the track that we want to place the clip on. All I've done is I've just made a little 1-bar selection here, okay? But notice where the grid divisions are. You see how I'm turning the grid divisions off? You see these divisions here within this beat, okay? There's one beat here, and the subdivision of the beat is 16th. So you see the 16th bars. Well, if you think about it, 46.4 to 46.4 240 is a 16th. 46.4 240 to 46.4 480. So just think 240 to 480 because we're in a 240 tick grid is a 16th. 480 to 720 is a 16th. And then 720 to 960 or 720 to 47.1 is another 16th. You see, we're in a 16th note grid. 240 ticks is a 16th. So why am I going this far in depth for this spotting? Because I want you to get the idea that you could grab that snare region, and if you know where you want to place it on the grid, you could just plop it right on the grid where you want it, okay? So let me just clarify something. We're actually placing here on the R&B. So you see I have that selection there. I have a 16th note selection starting at 720 on the R&B track. So I could grab that snare and just place it right there on the grid, and that would be exactly where I need to spot that. But you see how much work that was just to get to that location. Now, if you edit in grid mode a lot, it might not take that long, but I can make it a lot easier for you. So let's do this. Let's go to 5, go back to 4. So we've already moved them to 45.1, right? Well, rather than having to sit there and worry about our grid mode, you know, whether we're in bars and beats or whether we're in minutes and seconds, that kind of thing, all I need to do is just jump into spot mode and grab this snare clip and drag it anywhere. I could drag it up here on the R&B playlist, and then the spot mode dialog pops up. I check my spot, 46.4 720. 46.4 720. Okay, boom. Look up in the event edit window. Look up in the main counter. There it is, exactly on the grid. So spot mode makes it really easy to place clips without having to necessarily think about, okay, is my grid activated? Am I in slip mode? Am I in grid mode? Just put it in spot mode and spot it on the playlist location where you want to spot it. And then that would be the last step in the assignment, okay? So the other thing I would remind you about is just make sure you go over these important questions for review. And then if you have to use Dropbox, review this note. You need to upload it to your own, upload your zipped screen recording to your own Dropbox. And then you need to create a download link. And then you need to paste that link into a Word doc and upload that to FSO by the deadline. All right, so listen, this is the end of the live session. I am going to stop the archive right now, but I will hang on for another couple seconds here to answer a few last-minute questions. So if you do have any questions, if I've said something in the live session, whether we're in live now or whether you are watching the review of the archive, whether you're in my section or not, you're more than welcome to email me. We do encourage you to contact directly your instructor, but by all means, if I've said something in this live session and you'd like clarification, you're more than welcome to email me, and I will respond to you in a timely fashion. So this is the end of the archive. All the best to you.